We know that Special Counsel Jack Smith had filed court documents calling your actions in the aftermath of the 2020 election, quote, a private criminal effort. Can you respond to that?
He's a deranged person. I call him deranged Jack Smith. He just lost the big documents case. That was the biggest of them all. They said the documents case, and they said that was the toughest of them all. Let me tell you, we just won it, and it was won strongly and completely. And it was a total victory in Florida. And he is a person who is trying, and he works for Kamala and he works for Joe. This was a weaponization of government, and that's why it was released.
So what is ahead here?
So I think what you're going to see is this is going to go from the court of law to the court of public opinion. And I would expect that the former president, as his attorneys have, he will try to argue that releasing this is some form of election interference. Again, this case is not expected to go to trial anytime soon. If former President Trump is reelected, this case is expected to be dismissed by his attorney general. So the idea of releasing a long narrative like this from prosecutors, highly unusual. And his lawyers have argued, as they really have in all of his criminal cases, that any effort to release additional evidence is an effort to interfere with the election. Now, look, there's no precedence for this. I mean, this is just such an extraordinary circumstance. But I think that's what you're going to see next. The former president is going to argue that allowing even a redacted version of this filing to be released to the public is going to potentially hurt him in the election, and that this is part of this larger conspiracy that he alleges by judges, by prosecutors to hurt his chances in November. So I would expect that after initially we look and find the new details, I think that this is absolutely going to be used again in the court of public opinion to once again try to frame the former president as a martyr or a victim of the justice system.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I absolutely love this segment from MSNBC, okay? Because we know that they have a full-blown hard-on for Jack Smith in his new filing with evidence against Trump in the January 6th case, the 2020 election case that currently is not slated to go to trial before the election, okay? So in a last-ditch effort to try to sway the outcome of the 2024 election, this guy is filing this new evidence so that MSNBC can prop it up and to push more Trump derangement, to talk more about the 2020 election, to relitigate the 2020 election before the 2024 election, because Kamala Harris is struggling, right? They're struggling. So what do Democrats and the mainstream liberal media do? What do they default to whenever they're struggling, right? January 6th, the 2020 election, right? This is how you know they're desperate, right? This is how you know they're losing, okay? Because if they were winning, they would be talking about other things. But when they're losing, when they have nothing else, right, they default to 2020, right? And again, the irony here is that Jack Smith is desperately, and I mean desperately, trying to throw Trump in jail for his role in trying to challenge the 2020 election. But this guy is currently trying to rig the 2024 election with these bogus new filings, right? Because he can't get this trial to go to court before the election. Now, again, this is a last-ditch effort to sway public opinion, right? So clearly he's showing you through his actions that this is not about justice, right? What this really is about is rigging the outcome of the 2024 election against Trump while claiming to be a crusader of democracy. However, there are people who realize this trick from the Democrats that this is nonsense, okay? The Democrat Party isn't very democratic, and what they're doing actually is a bigger threat to democracy than what they claim they're fighting against, which brings me to this panel right here featuring Ari Mebler and some never Trumpers, at least one of whom are reformed, right? They had their Trump derangement cured by the Biden administration and the disastrous policies that plague this country. And let's just say this interview does not go the way that Ari Mebler thinks that it's going to go when he confronts some of these individuals on this new filing from Jack Smith. So without further ado, let's get into it.
But this is criminal evidence, newly unsealed, in the case against Donald Trump. You know how it works. If he loses the election, this federal trial will proceed. Your report is briefly mentioned on page 136 as an example of what they call deliberate and fraudulent efforts to lie about the election. So I will give you some time right now, having gone through your prison stint on the subpoena and looking at this filing. Don't you understand that much of this material has been disadvantage to Donald Trump as a defendant and could be part of what gets him potentially in trouble. We'll see what the jury says if there's a trial.
There's a couple things to say here. First of all, this is election interference, pure and simple. This drops 30 days out from Election Day.
Because of Trump's lawyers' delays.
When it never should have come before it.
Don't you think that the American people deserve to hear this?
Well, I'll go to Peter and then to Sarah. But not unlimited time.
Point.
Yes,
this is simply election interference. What's interesting about this as an issue now, I did a little polling. This is interesting. Crosstabs from a Rasmussen poll show that MSNBC viewers see the two top issues as democracy threats at 46% and abortion at 28%. For Fox, it's immigration at 49%, inflation at 32%. And for the general election, this democracy threat is at 6%.
Okay.
Which is to say that I get it why you want to talk a lot about this. But the last thing I want to make a point of.
Nobody gives a damn, right? That's the whole point. Nobody gives a damn about this anymore. Nobody cares. That's the point. But MSNBC, the Democrats, they want to continue to relitigate the 2020 election because they have nothing else, okay? When the economy is a disaster, when we're about to go into World War III, when the border is wide open, and the current Democrat presidential nominee is struggling to defend the disastrous record of the Biden-Harris administration, this is what you default to. This is what you default to. Again, this is how you know that Trump is winning, right? You know that Trump is winning when Jack Smith is getting so desperate that he's trying to sway public opinion with this bullshit filing, right? Right before the election, which again, it's supposed to be against DOJ policy, right? It's supposed to be against DOJ policy to be doing these types of things right before an election because they don't want to appear as partisan. But clearly they don't give a damn when it comes to Trump. And this dude drops this 30 days out before the election, again, because they know that Kamala Harris is losing. And if Trump wins, this is going to go away. But again, the reality here that MSNBC doesn't want to admit is that everybody's mind is already made up on this issue. They've been talking about this issue for the past 3 to 4 years straight. Ever since January 6th happened, this is what they've been talking about. People already have their minds made up. And there's nothing that can come out before the election that's going to change anybody's mind, okay? Because ultimately at the end of the day, right, the so-called threat to democracy, okay, which is what Democrats talk about in the way they frame it, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Because even if Trump loses this election, right, he's not in office, there's nothing that he can do. There's nothing he can do. The only thing he can do is legally challenge the election if he loses. But if he wins, then clearly he won't be challenging the election. And then also on top of that, after 4 years, he's leaving. There's no mechanism in place in which he can continue to stay in office. And he's not even going to try to stay in office. In fact, he already said, well, if I lose, I'm not running anymore. So clearly the dude only wants to be in office for 4 more years, and that's it. Trump is not up for re-election if he wins again. So you don't have to worry about this being a thing in 2028. You don't have to worry about it. But they want you to worry about it when there is no reason to worry about it at all. If anything, what I'm worried about in regards to the so-called threat to democracy is what will happen if Trump wins. Will Kamala Harris certify the election for Trump? Will Democrats accept the outcome of the election? Will they accept it? Will Democrats be peaceful? Or will they be rioting in the streets? Will they do what they've always been doing every single time they lose, like they did in 2016? When they had their own January 6th on Inauguration Day. When Trump was inaugurated, Hillary Clinton, her supporters, were out in the streets of D.C. rioting and destroying things. But again, this is the type of things that MSNBC and Democrats want to pretend never happened. But it did.
The Electoral Act of 1887, Ari, was used in 2000 in the Gore-Bush thing by the Democrats. In the next one, by the Democrats. Kerry used it. Clinton used it. That's all that was going on.
Okay, that's
with Trump.
All right, and I'm going to give Sarah time. Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, Trump didn't do anything the Democrats haven't tried to do before in the past, right? That's the reality of the situation here. And again, this is why this whole democracy conversation is nonsense, right? Because Democrats are very anti-democratic. They do everything that they accuse their opponents of doing, and then they want to sit on their high horse and pretend as if they're holier than thou when these people have been denying elections for decades now. The Democrats are the OG election deniers. There's never been an election that they've lost that they thought was fair, right? Ask these individuals, do you believe that Al Gore lost fair and square, right? Do you believe that? They'd be hard-pressed to tell you that they believe it because they don't.
You know, I stuck behind in Florida. I think both of you know this, or I've talked about this, because I was so outraged. I worked on the litigation, and then I got all the...
This was the like hanging chads.
Yeah, I got all the ballots. I helped release all the ballots through Freedom of Information, Florida Freedom of Information law, and the New York Times took them and counted them. If there had been a statewide recount in Florida, all the counties, Gore would have won. Under the terms of the partial recount, Bush would have won, according to the New York Times, counting these ballots, and they had to make judgments about the Chads. But that was never allowed to be finalized in the proper way because of Supreme Court intervention. It was so close, they took it and they stole it. And that was a much better court, a much more honest court than the one we have now.
My big story this weekend was the New York Times' excellent reporting on John Roberts and how he's been putting the thumb on the scale for Donald Trump all past this term. So my hot take is this. If Harris is lucky enough to win the Electoral College by only one state, John Roberts and his Supreme Court will find a way to flip that state back into Trump and give Trump the victory. It will be a redo of 2000. So people in Harris's camp need to understand they need to win by more than one state. They need to win by 2, 3, 4 states to make their margin of victory so large that the Supreme Court can't take it away from them.
There's a lot going on in that
I feel like they know they need to win by more than one state.
Yeah, I feel
because
like,
the Supreme Court is
I feel like that might
it.
be the only way to do this thing this time around, Scott.
I mean, for the record, Bush won Florida.
I would love to roll that recount back there.
I don't think so.
Please.
Come on. Come on. I mean, this is basically Democrats, when they say the election stolen, is good. When Trump says the election stolen, is bad, right? Because Democrats literally make the exact same claims, and they're still making the exact same claims to this day about an election that happened over 20 years ago. They're still claiming it was stolen. Amazing. But these are the people trying to lecture us about election denialism and democracy. Fascinating. Fascinating.
So I think that's going to be the common argument from supporters of Trump and Republicans on the Hill probably is going to be that this is election interference. But my counter argument to that is, shouldn't the voters in the 2024 election know if one of the candidates on the ballot tried to overthrow the 2020 election? I think that they deserve to have these facts presented to them. It's a shame that this won't go to trial beforehand. I wish that there had been more time on the calendar. There's a lot of people you can blame for that, whether that's Merrick Garland dragging his feet or even maybe the Senate should have voted to convict Donald Trump. We wouldn't find ourselves in these positions.
And I want to show, Ambassador, I want to show something. I'm going to bring you in. I want to show you people remember you as a star impeachment witness. You got a subpoena.
That was much ado about nothing, Ari.
Well, you got it. I showed it. You said at the time it was a quid pro quo. You confirmed it there.
As I said to Peter a moment ago, I had a quid pro quo this morning. I went to Starbucks and I gave them my American Express card, and they gave me a cup of coffee.
Right, but under law, a commercial transaction is different than a quid pro quo, which I think you know because you were at the center of that. And after January 6th, we saw what Ms. Matthews did. Let's listen to where you drew a line in the sand.
Completely in, even with all of the foibles that everyone has already identified, and I don't need to go through them again, until January 6th. It was a no for me after that.
A no for you after that. Why was it important for you to say no more Trump because of his January 6th conduct? And do you stand by that?
No, I don't stand by it. And I'll tell you why. I've now lived 4 years under the Biden-Harris policies. And I have to say that those policies are not only becoming an existential threat to our country's way of life, but to our allies as well.
So when you
and it has to.
This is
no,
so
no.
Ambassador,
Let me,
this is, I'll let you finish,
Ari,
but
no,
this is so
finish.
striking. You said it was a no for me after that, after January 6th.
I did.
And here we are right now.
I did.
And you're saying it's a yes for you.
It is a yes for me. It is an absolute yes for me. That is how badly the Biden-Harris team have prosecuted their job.
But the whole point you seem to be making was that January 6th and that kind of attack on democracy is bigger than any policy.
But I am seeing so many attacks on democracy that eclipse January 6th.
So I want to ask Sarah.
Facts. It's really that simple. It's really that simple. Again, this is why I said that this democracy conversation is nonsense, right? Because Democrats are literally the pot calling the kettle black. That's what they are. And if anything, again, Democrats are worse. They're full-blown authoritarians. They don't even have democracy within their own party, right? How in the world can a party that rigs their own primaries against their candidates and also overthrew the guy that won their primary with millions of votes, overthrew him and replaced him with somebody who didn't receive any votes, while at the same time being the same party that denies every election, the outcome of every election that they lose. And as a result, we've seen their supporters get violent, okay? They incite violence when they lose, right? How can they lecture us about democracy? They can't, right? You can't lecture me about democracy. You have no room to talk at all. See, what you're seeing here, what you're witnessing here, this guy is what we call a reformed never Trumper, right? His Trump derangement has been cured, right? By the disaster that is the Biden administration. Now he's no longer cognitively impaired. And because he's not cognitively impaired from his Trump derangement, he's thinking rationally. He realizes, wait. Policy is what matters here. The democracy conversation is nonsense because Democrats are actually a bigger threat to democracy than Trump. So why would I vote based off of that in January 6th? When the Democrats are worse and their policies are worse? That is how a rational person should be thinking, right? That is how a rational never-Trumper should be thinking. That's how Mitt Romney should be thinking. That's how Alyssa Farah Griffin should be thinking. That's how Anna Navarro should be thinking. That's how all these people who come out here and call themselves Republicans should be thinking, but they're not, right? Because their Trump derangement has impaired their ability to think, right? To rationally think, okay? That or they're selling out. Like Anna Navarro, she's clearly selling out for the parties and the stardom and Hollyweird. And I would also throw Alyssa Farah Griffin in that category as well, too. They're all selling out, right? But this guy clearly is like, okay, I got to think rationally about the election and who to vote for. Yes, I don't like what happened on January 6th. I don't stand by it. But damn, the Democrats are much worse on that issue of democracy and also the actual policies and the issues that matter today to the American people. That is how you're supposed to think about it, right? This is why I love this clip so much.
If you want to ask me what those are, I'm happy.
Well, I'm going to go Sarah in the back.
See you
but this is, I appreciate
Kamala Harris why she flip-flopped on 16 things.
Look, I appreciate everyone being here. Sarah, I'm curious your reaction to someone who, like you, has participated, and I say that positively, Ambassador. You, as a government official, were asked to testify, and you did. And then you drew a line at Jan 6. And then, Sarah, we see this with certain people, and I say it respectfully, who say that, he's at the table with you, and then tell us years later, never mind. Can you explain that, and what's your response to that?
A couple things I want to hit real quick. First, Kamala Harris, I think we should give her grace that she can moderate her positions. If J.D. Vance can go from calling Trump America's Hitler to now being his running mate, I'm going to give her that grace that she can.
No, she can't get that grace because she's not explaining why she did that. The difference between J.D. Vance and Kamala Harris is that J.D. Vance has explained why he changed his position. He explained why he changed his opinion. Kamala Harris has not done that. When asked to explain why'd you change your position, she doesn't do so, right? So no, she doesn't get grace. She doesn't get a pass, okay? She should be called out because she's not thoroughly explaining why is it that she's changing her positions. In fact, she doesn't even acknowledge that she changed her position at all, which makes it even worse.
Moderate her positions too. The ambassador said that he's concerned about protecting our allies. Well, what about Ukraine? Donald Trump has basically said that we should give parts of Ukraine away to Putin. And on top of that, he has openly invited Putin to invade some of our NATO allies. So those are things that concern me about a second Trump term that have nothing to do with democracy.
Peter, I'm going to enforce time. And I'll give you time.
You moderate the next debate.
Well, by the way, I don't mute Mike, Ambassador. But Sarah, let me reach that.
Yeah.
When you look at him and you see
Yeah.
And there are other people like him who served the government. We credit that, who participated and testified honestly, and then say no more after January 6th, and then they come back. It's almost like a whole wing of the party is J.D. Vance, and never Trump, then ends up meeting always Trump. How do you explain that, and what should voters make of that? To Sarah, and then you get a rebuttal.
Please let me in after that. Thank you.
I think the difference between us is that I'm willing to set policy aside in this election. I don't agree with Kamala Harris on most things, but at the end of the day, you know what we can agree on?
Right.
That we respect the Constitution, that I believe she is someone who will uphold it. And Donald Trump has shown us that he won't. He is the first president in our nation's history to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power. And so even J.D. Vance trying to have this revisionist history last night at the VP debate where he's trying to say that Trump peacefully transferred power over. Yeah, that was after 140 police officers were brutally beaten at the Capitol, and rioters were there inspired by these conspiracy theories that Trump spread, all because he couldn't accept the fact that he lost to someone he perceives as weak as Joe Biden. So, yes, I don't want to...
All of these same things can literally be said about the 2016 election. Again, that's the crazy part. You can say the exact same things about what happened during the 2016 election. But again, you know, these people, they're just, they're really living in a world where they pretend that Democrats just don't do this, right? This has never happened before. We don't have any type of precedence for this type of stuff. The reality is that Trump had the opportunity to be a dictator. He could have declared martial law, took unilateral control of the military. There are actual real things that he could have did if he actually wanted to take over the government, right? January 6th was not an attempt to overthrow the government. It was not an attempt to do any of these things that these people are talking about, because he could have went about it in much better ways, right? If January 6th was an attempt to overthrow the government, it was a sad attempt, okay? I hope that Trump didn't think that January 6th was his attempt to overthrow the government. I think that Trump is much smarter than that, right? But the reality is that on Inauguration Day, he left, right? Which is a peaceful transfer of power, okay? By definition. So again, if you want to say that Trump didn't peacefully transfer over power or whatever, then you can say that Hillary didn't do so either, right? When Obama left, because her supporters were out in the street not being peaceful on Inauguration Day. Just saying.
Put someone like that back in power in the Oval Office, because I don't think he deserves to step foot anywhere near it.
This is stunning.
I promised the ambassador rebuttal.
Policy doesn't matter.
Yeah, my turn. Thank you. I was about to say that. Policy matters greatly because policy translates into our way of life and the way our country operates. What I want to say is what Donald Trump did on January 6th was not an exemplary thing. And I already said he lost the election. He should have admitted he lost the election and moved on. And the best victory would have been to beat Joe Biden at the ballot box, now in this case Kamala Harris, in 2024. So you're not going to catch me in that group of Republicans who deny that a proper election took place, even though there were irregularities. I don't believe those votes would have added up to a change in the election. What I want to express is that I've now lived for 4 years under the Biden-Harris administration. I lived in a bucolic city of Portland, Oregon, which has been destroyed by those policies, absolutely decimated. Businesses are suffering. My own business is suffering solely for political reasons. And it's all fixable, and they don't want to fix it.
And if Trump loses, Governor, in one...
So you see that, you heard that, okay? This is how a rational person thinks, right? If you are another Trumper, this is the rational way to think about it, is that, hey, policies do matter. And we know that Trump's policies are superior to Kamala Harris's policies. So deciding to vote for Kamala Harris because of democracy when there's nothing really democratic about the Democrat Party and their policies are worse is ridiculous. It's nonsense, right? It's peak Trump derangement. And, you know, hey, I'm glad this guy snapped out of it, right? And he went on air and basically said that, hey, I'm voting for Trump, okay? And, you know, hey, this is a rare case in which Trump derangement has been cured, okay? Cured by the disastrous results that we have experienced as a country due to the Biden-Harris administration. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.